Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for Alumni Tracking, today's Fundraising Frontier. My name is Kevin Bauman. I'm the Director of Philanthropic Initiatives here at Capture. And before I introduce Dr. Tom Golden, I'll go over a few quick housekeeping items. Just so everyone knows, you are logged into the webinar on listen-only mode, and your line is muted. So please ask questions as we go along using the chat function on the right side of your screen. We will anticipate going about 40 to 45 minutes today, and then aggregate all of those questions and answer those succinctly in the end. But please ask questions as we go along today. So with that, I will quickly introduce myself again, Kevin Bauman, the Director of Philanthropic Initiatives here at Capture. Very pleased to be joined by Dr. Tom Golden, our Senior Vice President of Data Science. Tom, do you want to say hello?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Yes, and thank you, Kevin, for that introduction. Excited to get a chance to talk about the things we talk a lot about here at Capture, which is how to bring technologies that have really reshaped a great portion of our economy. I mean, if you have Netflix in your home, then you have machine learning right at your fingertips. And so we're very excited to get a chance to show a little bit about the work we've been doing and showing how it can apply to a modern advancement shop. So thanks, Kevin.
Good, thanks, Tom. And Tom and I could go on and on about Tom's experience in higher ed, and I'd be happy to elaborate on myself. But for everyone's time, if you have any questions about Tom or myself, please feel free to follow up either by email or phone after the presentation. And with that, we will jump into Alumni Tracking, today's Fundraising Frontier. So as many of you are probably seeing in your program, there's actually a shift towards digital relationships that we're seeing with alumni. Some of the stats you see in front of you might remind you that it used to be that energetic phone-a-thon callers or a direct mail piece with the right mailing labels or pocket calendar were very engaging for alumni. And it would be that phone-a-thon caller that would be the connection for the institution to the alum. They would call once, twice, 3 times a year, and we would get an annual gift, or we would send out the calendar year-end solicitation, we would receive an annual gift. But more recently, we've seen some of those metrics start to decline. There is almost a mandatory comment about Stanford ending their phone-a-thon program that comes up when we talk about this, but also as we talk about open rates for mass email solicitations. And every year we see that younger alumni are only checking their mail when they receive a birthday card, maybe it's something around the holidays, and certainly when Amazon Prime delivers. So we're seeing a shift from traditional solicitation calendars into an online relationship. And so one of the questions we get is, how do we know that alumni are moving to an online relationship? And so what you see on the screen in front of you is a scatter plot of online behavior based on grad year. So along the bottom of the chart, you'll see that there's a grad year distribution based on decade. And on the left-hand side of your screen, it's the total number of visits for alumni in that grad year. And so you'll see that alumni are visiting from across different grad years. And Tom, I know you found some interesting data, so let me pull up an interesting stat that we've had as we track these alumni, that half of alumni that we have tracked and that we are currently tracking graduated before 1985. And we're using 1985 as an indicator of age because not all of our partners have 100% coverage in birth dates. But if we use 1985 as an indicator of age, that puts prospects at a very important age of between 50 and 55 years old. And so half of the alumni that we're tracking are above the age of 50. So if that comes as a surprise, Tom, did you have some interesting data on older alumni?
Yeah, as we were talking, I went and did a lot of research. And what it's found is that despite, I think, what people would normally assume, internet adoption rates for older citizens of the United States have really been increasing. So, for example, smartphone ownership among seniors whose household income is higher than the mean average have increased over 39% just since 2013. So there's this hockey stick of technology adoption. Fully 87% of seniors who are higher income seniors are living in households that have home broadband. And over 90% of that same group are using the internet on a weekly basis, at least a weekly basis. So we're seeing this boomer generation being significantly more tech savvy than previous generations of that same age groups.
Tom, I love your point because we can see in the scatter plot that we've got a number of different activity levels. So we do have some alumni that are coming on to 4, 6 times, but we also have alumni that are coming on 10, 12, 14, 16 times. And the value of tracking individual alumni is to be able to identify those alumni who have the highest affinity. And so you can see those alumni as they start to float to the top. And we'll get into in a minute how older alumni translates into higher capacity, how that translates into planned giving opportunities. But if we drill down into total visits by donors and non-donors. So it might be a common assumption that everyone online has high affinity and therefore they're going online and they're making their gift online. As it turns out, there's actually a pretty even distribution of donors and non-donors online. So as we look at that same chart on the left, again, you'll see the grad years along the bottom and then the activity along the left-hand side. This time we've broken it out by donor and non-donor activity online, where you see donors appearing in the teal circles and non-donors appearing in the orange circles. And so you'll see a pretty even distribution between young alumni and older alumni, both in donors and non-donors. But then if I draw your attention to the right, as we continue to look at not only visits, but the number of pages that alumni are viewing, we can see that there's a pretty good distribution of donors and non-donors active on the site and the number of pages that they're viewing. The importance here is that alumni aren't just coming to the site and spending 3 hours on the site looking around. They're coming for very particular reasons, but they're also not coming for a singular reason. And in large part, this can be due to organic visits for alumni who may have an interest in the athletics team. Let's say they want to know more about the baseball roster this year. They're going to be able to get that information on their own time frame when they come and visit online. But then the institution follows up with an e-communication about the baseball team. Maybe it's an interesting article on the pitcher, maybe it's an interesting article on the coach. And then there's a click-through on that e-communication, and that lands them on the alumni page. And so we're actually driving traffic to multiple areas of the institution's website. And so by tracking all of that traffic across an entire institutions.edu, across the athletics page, across the entire digital footprint that an institution has, we're able to come up with a very robust view of individual alumni behaviors, affinities, and interests. So if we took that a step further, yes, Tom.
And Kevin, real fast. Well, if you go back, sorry, apologize. I should have jumped in there. One thing I want to note here about just the data when we're talking about visits there on the left, total visits by grad year, that's using the same kind of definition that Google Analytics uses. And so these are unique browsing sessions. So I want you to think about that for a second. I mean, these are unique browsing sessions. So they could, at a time, see 2 or 3 different pages. And so you're seeing this just consistent presence by donors and non-donors alike that are on your page. And as you'll see a little bit later, each one of these represents a person. This is not an unknown individual. This is an individual person that we can identify. So we'll get to that. A little teaser.
I like it, Tom. So let's talk about where alumni are visiting on the institution's web presence. So it's probably not going to come as a surprise, and some of this data might be able to verify some of the initial thoughts that many of you have, that a lot of alum have a connection to the athletics program after they leave an institution. And as it comes out, the athletics page does receive a dominant share of traffic. So 46% of all of the visits that we have tracked have gone to the athletics page. And then we go over to the main.edu page. So you can think of this as anything that has to do with academics. So the College of Business page would be under here. The College of Pharmacy page would be under here. The main.edu. Alumni are going back and checking information. Maybe it's on their favorite professor. Maybe it's on a ranking for one of the colleges on campus. That would all fall under the main domain. But then we get into 7% of all alumni activity is focused on the alumni page. So that's a really good statistic for making sure that we have current content on the alumni page. We have engaging content going out in our e-communications that are pointing alumni to that alumni page, because a full 7% of behavior goes there. If I step down from there, the Day of Giving page received 5% of all the traffic that we've tracked for institutions. So really, really good data for the investment that many of our institutions are making in their Day of Giving campaign. That 5% of all alumni traffic is going to that Day of Giving campaign. website. So really, really exciting information. For my annual giving officers who are listening today, as you see the athletics page and you see the main.edu and the alumni page, and you see that that's the dominant share of activity on an institution's website, I hope you get really excited to know that that's where we can start engaging alumni with annual fund solicitations on those pages through marketing automation. It's a bit of another topic, but know that that's where alumni are engaging the institution. We now know that, and so we can start using online engagement as a new solicitation calendar. For my planned giving officers, for my major gift officers, for anybody carrying a portfolio, I'm going to direct your attention all the way down to the planned giving site. It's the last one on there, having 0.5% of all traffic for alumni that we've tracked. Because my planned giving officers know that if we're going to talk about where the next $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, $4 million, $5 million gift is going to come from, oftentimes it's going to come from the planned giving office. And so tracking visitors to that planned giving site gives us the opportunity to identify those visitors who are having that conversation in the household, when and where they're having that conversation. So I love this chart because it shows the opportunity that alumni tracking has across the advancement office. For my annual giving officers, for my planned giving officers, we've got alumni of all capacity levels engaged on the institution's website. And to prove that point, the chart you see in front of you shows online visitors by capacity level. So we put this chart out there in this format because every institution draws their lines for leadership and annual giving in a different manner. And so we hope you'll use this opportunity to draw your own line on where you draw your metrics for major and leadership annual giving to better understand how much traffic and how much of those prospects are actually engaged with the institution online. Oftentimes we hear from institutions that we are far too reliant on too few major gift donors. So we're really excited to report that if you draw the line at $5,000 and up, then 1/3 of all of the alumni that we are tracking across an institution's website meet leadership or major gift criteria. 1/3 of all of the alumni that we're tracking are leadership or major gift prospects. Some other exciting data with those prospects is that 57% of those were previously unassigned by the institution. So there's two really good sides of that coin. That means 43% of the alumni that we're tracking online, we're able to deliver information to existing gift officers, vice presidents, anybody carrying a portfolio about alumni activity in their portfolio. Whenever an alum registers for an event, whenever an alum goes online and buys tickets to the next play, we can immediately notify the gift officer of that event registration or the fact that the alum will be at that play, and then they can show up. They just happen to show up at that event. So we're able to provide relevant information in relevant timeframes. The other value is for anybody on the phone in prospect research or vice presidents trying to create gift portfolios. 57% of prospects that we're identifying as high capacity and high affinity online are currently unmanaged by the institution. And so by identifying those prospects with high affinity and high capacity, alumni tracking can now prioritize those relationships for an institution. Since I am a gift officer at heart, I want to drill down a little bit further into high capacity alumni activity online. So what you see in front of you is a familiar chart of donors and non-donors, but along the bottom this time we have capacity information. So just know lower capacity is on the left and higher capacity is on the right. And then we're also charting that against total visits online. And if I draw your attention over to a capacity level of 8, which would qualify for a major gift level, and we go all the way up to 20 visits, you'll notice that we have an orange dot. And that is a non-donor who has high capacity and very high affinity. And so what you're seeing here is an actual data set that we used with a partner. So that orange dot is actually associated with a name, and we were able to provide that name to a partner so we can follow up on that. So we're talking about aggregates in large part, but I think it's really important that we talk about the fact that these are individuals. Tom, did you want to talk a little bit about individuals and how that relates here?
Yeah. So one of the things, the way we're able to do this is through, our core software. It's called Capture Behavioral Engagement, which sits behind your website and allows for the data that Kevin's been walking through. But we also apply machine learning on top of that to be able to very quickly and easily quantify for you who is most interested. We call it our Capture Affinity Index. And it's similar to number of visits. So if we were to array this chart based on Capture Affinity Index, this would sort of spread out the way that it does. And the thing that's really kind of revolutionized many other areas, particularly as it relates to marketing, is that it moves you from an environment where your segmentation can only get down to a certain, fine-grained detail. You can only get that bucket, so to speak, whether it's young alumni, whether it's planned giving, whether it's any number of things that you're bucketing and kind of reaching out to. This actually takes it down to a segment of one and gives you really actionable data that you can actually use today. And it's a person by person, but it does that on scale because it's utilizing computers for what they do best, which is churn through a ton of web data and say, this person, contact this person. And that's really what, when we were spreading out this data and taking a look at it, what we were most excited about. And really in this environment, bucketing and bracketing is no longer necessary. It certainly is understandable and certainly will never go away as a marketing technique, but we've got to start to raise our standards and say, no, we can actually go down to a segment of one, which is unique.
Tom, I think that's an important distinction because we're going to talk about a lot of aggregate data today, but we're also going to talk about how do we get down to that level of one, and what does this data tell us about individual alumni activity, and how can we turn that into actual philanthropy? Because a lot of this data is really neat and it's new to the industry, but we need to talk about making this data actionable and how it translates into actual philanthropy. So as we look into how online activity translates into participation, the chart that you have on your screen, if we start on the bottom, you'll see that this charts the number of visits along the bottom, and then along the top, each one of those bubbles is representative of the participation rate for the alumni that fall into each one of those visits. Now, if I draw your attention down to the middle of the screen, the division-wide participation rate is 11%. So let's use that as a benchmark for just think if we were as a division going to report our numbers to U.S. News and World Report, we would report that as 11%. But if we looked at alumni that were visiting online, a single visit online increases someone's likelihood to give 4 times. So it increases their participation rate to 45%. And if we can get someone to come back again, we can increase their likelihood to give up to 50%. As soon as we get to that third visit online, someone's likelihood to give goes up 5 times. So we're really, really excited about delivering the right message to the right alum at the right time by monitoring their alumni activity and their activity online to move alumni along this spectrum here to increase their likelihood to give. We're going to reference this chart throughout the presentation, so I'll just ask everyone to make note of the fact that as you show up one time, you are 4 times more likely to give. If we get you to show up 3 times online, you are 5 times more likely to give.
Hey Kevin, we have a question.
Yes, Tom.
We have a question that just came in. Just to clarify, actually, can you go back 2 slides? I think it's important.
Sure.
So, a question about just to clarify the orange dot. That was a non-donor who had visited 20 plus times. Yes, that one right there. That's a non-donor as an individual. So that's a person that can be actually identified. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, that's great. Thanks for calling pause there. And I think that's a really important distinction. Is that again, just because alumni are online and active online, if our existing solicitation channels are direct mail and phone-a-thon and mass email communication, and alumni have chosen a relationship online, then oftentimes our existing solicitation channels are going to miss alumni where they have engaged the institution. And so by tracking them online, we can identify their browsing habits. And now we can start to engage that individual where and when they engage the institution. So you will see, and you did see, a fair number of non-donors on the charts that we put up, because existing solicitation channels oftentimes are going to be going out through direct mail where alumni are visiting online. And until we identify those individual alumni interests, then we're oftentimes going to be missing them.
Yep.
So thank you for the question, Tom. Thank you for...
Yeah, you bet. Yep. One more while you're navigating back to where we were. Question about whether we will share the slide deck. Yes, we will, along with a link to a video of this presentation, so you can share that with your friends and colleagues. Thank you. Thank you again. Thank you for guys for the questions. Keep them coming.
So we've looked at participation and how does online activity translate into actual participation. But if we want to look at how does online activity translate into lifetime giving, there's actually some really exciting relationships that we can draw between online activity relating to affinity, and then how does that affinity translate into lifetime giving. So I'm going to let Tom talk quickly about our Capture Affinity Index and how we aggregate someone's lifetime affinity and browsing behaviors. And then I will direct us back into this chart to better understand how it becomes relevant.
You bet. So as a very proud data nerd and baseball fan, one of my favorite movies and books is Moneyball. If you're familiar with the Michael Lewis book, fantastic book, even better than the movie. But one of the things they make a very big point in that book, and really what that whole movement was about, was getting complex information and just a flood of data, getting it down to one number that can summarize a pattern or a trend or something that's going on. And so we have attempted to do that by creating a Capture Affinity Index. And this is basically an algorithm that takes all these different components of web engagement. A lot of the same data that you've been seeing us present here, but puts it all into one number for you. And it continues to increase over time. So it's over the lifetime of that prospect or that donor or non-donor that you can very quickly see who is most interested in you. We also have, as an aside, an engagement score, and that is time-based. What that does is it looks at the engagement for an individual over the last 7 days. And so that would be a good measure to use if you were looking, maybe you had an event that was in a particular area and you really wanted to appeal to people who really were on this site more recently. But what we've seen across the various ways that Capture is applied to the educational setting, that Capture Affinity Index and an Affinity Index is a very powerful way to very quickly identify who's most interested and has a greater affinity. So Kevin, affinity as a score, contrast that approach, I guess, with what you have seen in the industry in terms of how affinity is measured.
I appreciate that, Tom. Oftentimes, and I think a lot of our listeners can relate, oftentimes we're looking at data to say, was the person in the chess club 30 years ago when they were on campus, or were they on an athletics team, or maybe they attended an event last month. So more of a historical look back at engagement as an indicator of affinity, rather than, in my opinion, what you're describing is more of a current affinity index. So does the person have affinity for the institution today? Is that helpful?
That's right. Well, I think our point of view, my point of view is that every institution, no matter how big or small you are, you have this stream of super engaged, super interested donors and alums who want to be engaged with you. You just can't see them. And even if you could see them, how are you going to know which ones to talk to? Because again, it is a fire hose of people that are constantly coming there while you're asleep, while you're brushing your teeth. They're all there, and so that's why we provided the tools to help. Not only can you see that stream, you can engage with them to meet your campaign goals.
Tom, I think that's a great point. And if I try and tie this slide together with this last slide, in large part, what the Affinity Index is able to do is better understand an alum's browsing habits. So better understand alumni that are moving to the right on this scale, and then also add in some of the different algorithmic variables that Tom either mentioned or some that I'm sure he left out. But add those all together to create that affinity index. And much like an individual browsing behavior shows that there's an increase in likelihood of giving, increased affinity shows that there is a significant increase in lifetime giving. So very, very exciting information. And as that pertains to planned gifts, we're really excited to release this information. We're actually going to put in a handout for everyone in the handout section right now. So if you would like more information about these two slides, both on who is visiting the planned giving site and also identifying alumni that have high capacity and that are older, please reference the handout in the webinar section right now. And as I mentioned, we're really excited to hand this out because we believe this is a first in the industry to be able to identify those people visiting a planned giving site by name, so that way we can better understand some of their demographic information. And so when we looked at this data for our partner institutions, it may come as a surprise that 25% of all of the visitors to the planned giving site graduated after 1990. So again, we're using grad year as an indication of age, but graduating after 1990 would mean that you are under the age of 50. And that's 25% of the visitors to the planned giving site. At the same time, we're also able to identify older alumni who have high affinity for the institution. Maybe they didn't visit the planned giving page, but we can identify those alumni who have very, very high affinity for the institution, who are older, likely have higher capacity, but they haven't showed up on the planned giving radar. And so that example is on the chart on the right-hand side of the screen. So again, you'll see grad year along the bottom, and you'll see the number of visits along the left-hand side. And you'll see as those visits increase, we've highlighted some individual prospects in green. And as Tom mentioned, behind each one of those circles is an actual prospect, an actual alum with a name, a capacity, a story, an interest, and a relationship with the institution. And you can see many of these older alumni are visiting 5, 10, 15, 20 times. And as a planned giving officer, these are people that I want to make sure are on my radar. They have very high capacity, they're older alumni, and they have a great relationship with the institution. So if you would like more information about planned giving, please take reference of the handout that was distributed in the webinar today. And please follow up with either Tom or myself. We would be happy to elaborate on either of those.
So we have another question, Kevin, is how are we identifying the alum? And obviously this is a much broader, as a detailed question. We'd love to actually show you obviously in a demo situation, but Kevin, do you want to kind of run through the different scenarios on how exactly we are able to get to where each one of those circles is a person?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Tom. Thank you for paying attention to those questions, Tom. I was just going to go on. So that's a great reason to call a pause. So yes, identifying alumni actually happens in 3 different ways. Currently, we can integrate with an institution's outbound e-communications. So that's oftentimes a large part of the existing solicitation calendar. And there is a small snippet of code that goes in outbound communications. And there is a small snippet of code that goes on the institution's .edu domain or any web page that we're going to track. And when an alum responds to the call to action, so maybe it's that they were interested in the article that you sent out, or maybe it was a registration for an event. When they click that link, the code in the email talks to the code on the website. And long story short, that is the primary driver of our identification process, is integrating with the institution's outbound e-communications. We also have the ability to deliver on-screen messaging when a prospect is active on the institution's website. And that on-screen messaging oftentimes allows the individual to sign up for the newsletter or get more information about the president's blog, that sort of thing. And when somebody puts in their information in that online prompt, what we would call dynamic content, they're then identified with first name, last name, and email. The third way would be alumni who are going on and registering for an event. We're able to identify those alumni as they register online as well. So, Tom, anything to add to that? Is that a pretty good high-level overview?
Yeah, you got it. But basically, it's a lot of the communications that advancement officers are already sending out. You're just adding in some of capture technology. And the more of your site that you track, meaning that you have the code on, which is very similar to like a Google Analytics code. So if you have Google Analytics on your site, it is just the same process for our code. And so that's how it works.
I'm gonna take one step towards making this a capture commercial, but I promise I won't go too far. One of the more common questions that we get is, do you have to send out the communications for us? And the short answer to that is no. We can integrate with your existing e-communications, so you don't have to change anything about your solicitation plan or the way that your solicitation plan is structured. So if we went on to building strategy, we now know that alumni online are 4 to 7 times more likely to give. There's a direct relationship between online activity and lifetime giving, and that major gift prospects self-identify online. So let's take all of this data and let's start building that into strategy. In large part, we're collecting a lot of data because alumni are online browsing in different behaviors and different patterns, and we're collecting all of that data and aggregating it. And so we need to make this data actionable so action can be taken. So here at Capture, the way that we do that is actually threefold, and they're all focused on ending blind discovery phone calls. I mentioned being a gift officer myself. I know blind discovery calls are not the fun part of the job, and our goal is to end blind discovery calls. So what you see on the left-hand side of the screen is an immediate visitor alert. We all have those alumni that we just want to know when they breathe. Maybe they're assigned to the president, maybe they're assigned to the vice president, maybe they're just a high net worth individual in our own portfolio, and we want to know when they breathe. That visitor alert is sent to either the gift officer or the vice president, whomever it is that needs to know about this alum's activity within seconds of their activity on the website. So taking this data and making it actionable means we will never again miss an opportunity to engage an alum because they registered for an event and we didn't know about it. If I focus your attention on the far right for the daily visitor alert, that is a summary of all of the activity on an institution's website the day before. And that summary, for my prospect researchers who are on the phone, that summary includes capacity information, that summary includes our affinity index, that summary includes how many visits they've had, and it's a one-step look at all of that activity from the night before to decide, should we prioritize this relationship, and is now the right time to reach out? Tom, you had a great story about the right way to reach out, rather than just saying, we saw you on the site. You had a great story.
Right. Well, yeah, that would not be the way to go. Hey, we saw you on the website. So this one institution was trying to drive a particular call to action, and they use data from the integration. So we integrate with whatever system that you're working. We have an integrations team that works really hard to make sure this data flows back and forth very nicely between systems. And so they used Capture Affinity Index to cull the list down and sent one email trying to drive action. And they got a really fantastic response. So 1,400 emails and 255 individuals took that action. And one particular person contacted the office and said, it's unreal. Like, you guys, I was just on the website. This must be a sign from God that I must be, come to your institution as a student enrolling. And so that institution now refers to it as an email from God. It's just using information that's smart and being able to recognize when someone is interested in your institution. That is particularly powerful. In a way, it's like sophisticated listening is what this technology kind of represents.
Tom, that's a great story. We've got plenty of great information on timing the right outreach and knowing when to reach out. So the other thing I'll mention, Tom, is we in Louisville, Kentucky right now, we're getting a pretty good storm coming through. So Tom, can you just verify that we're still going with the value of personalized messaging on the screen right now?
Yep, I can see it. Hopefully everybody can too as well. Yep, you're
Okay,
looking
great.
good.
Well, we're going to continue through the storm. So for anybody listening on the recording, we're going to continue through the storm. Tom, that's a great comment about making sure that we reach out in a respectful way. And oftentimes the information that we're capturing is actually allowing us to reach out in the most meaningful way. Because rather than doing a blind discovery call, as we identify high capacity, high affinity alum, those individual points of interest are also captured so we can develop meaningful relationships. The last chart that you'll see on the middle of the screen is related to gift officer travel. And that can also be allocated towards maybe it's presidential travel or better understanding where we should have our next alumni association event. Because oftentimes we're allocating travel to where there is a heavy density of alumni, where in reality what we're really looking for is a density of alumni that are actively engaged with the institution. And so when we can identify that there are more alumni in New York that are actively engaged with the institution than in Florida, then that might impact our decision on when we put the president on a plane or where we have our next alumni association event. So it's no longer just where do alumni live, it's where are alumni who are actively engaged with the institution. So we've talked a lot about major and planned gifts. Before we wrap up, I want to make sure that we have the opportunity to talk about annual giving, because in large part, marketing automation and the ability to track alumni online allows us to deliver that messaging, like Tom was saying, on a one-to-one basis. And so anybody tuning in that's thinking about this as an annual giving solicitation calendar, we'll share a quick case study with you. So for one of our partners, we were measuring engagement. And engagement at Capture is the step before philanthropy. So it is the alum resonating with our message? Is the message resonating with the alum? Because if that message is not resonating, then that's going to make our solicitation less effective. So how can we get that person to click through on that call to action for that first time? How do we get them to create that first visit where we know that first visit makes them 4 times more likely to give? As it turns out, for the existing communications that our partner had, those communications were resonating very well with older alumni. As a matter of fact, as you can see by the chart on the left, 12% of all alumni in the 1960s that graduated in the 1960s with an email address on file clicked through an email, responded to the call to action. It was that powerful. Now we saw an opportunity with our younger alumni, where younger alumni that had graduated since 2000 and since 2010, their click-through rates were only 1% and 2%. And so for the first time, we were able to identify, is our messaging resonating with alumni? Who is the message not resonating with? And then tailor messaging to engage the population that's being missed. And so what you see on the right are engagement levels after messaging was adjusted. And you can see there was a significant gain in young alumni engagement. And the importance here is building relationships across the alumni spectrum to make sure that we have a great donor base regardless of grad year. And I'm very pleased to tell you that I looked at that data just this morning, and young alumni engagement in 2000 and 2010 overall is up to over 5%. So that's a 400% increase from where we started, simply by knowing where and when alumni are engaging the institution, how they are being missed by some of our messaging. And a great example is for this particular partner, that one of the most successful articles in their e-newsletter was focused on their relationship with one of the contestants on The Voice. And that communication was very effective in engaging some of our younger alumni who may be a little bit more hip and in tune with current events. So before we wrap up today, I know we had, Tom, we answered a few questions as we went along throughout the presentation.
Kevin, are you showing the different slides? I'm only seeing the no blind discovery calls, so it may have gotten stuck, but that's okay. Like I said, we will be distributing the deck that comes with it. So didn't know if there's anything on your end, but go ahead. What you were saying.
Yep, Tom, I appreciate the heads up. We've got a fellow team member at Capture that just walked in the office and showed us the screen that we're stuck on. So the short answer is, Tom, thank you for pointing that out. Yes, we are showing a different screen, but we will be happy to follow up with the appropriate messaging. So since we are stuck on the screen, for anybody who is listening, we'll be happy to follow up with that messaging. But a few different takeaways. Just please remember that alumni visiting online are 4 to 7 times more likely to give. There's a distinct relationship between online activity and lifetime giving. Tom talked about how we can track that lifetime affinity index and how that relates, and that high capacity, high affinity alumni have a relationship online. So with that, there's 4 and 5. I won't read all of those points to you. But Tom, any closing remarks? We've lost questions because we've got a pretty bad storm here in Louisville. But any closing remarks from your end?
No, I think, and I'm really, really excited that you guys have joined us today to hear about this. I think like any type of change in an environment, oftentimes a technological change, starts the wave, and then it's the cultural change. And what I mean by that is, it took Uber, showing me on my phone how many cars there were around me before, I realized that, cabs were not that great. That was a choice. And in this setting, what we're saying here is that there's a stream of interested individuals who want to engage with you. They're just not engaging with you in the ways that maybe conventionally we've set up our marketing campaigns to elicit, but they're no less engaged. And in fact, given what we know about technology and the need for technology to be able to customize experiences, it's perhaps exactly where we should be as a market, is figuring out how to do this. And we're excited to be able to get really first look in the industry at this kind of marketing and recruitment. And I could not be happier. And I'm really excited to get a chance to talk with many of you moving forward. If you have questions you want to follow up and discuss about your specific situation, we're obviously interested and able to do that. Kevin, are you with us?
Tom, you got us.
All right.
We were just discussing the computer audio. We think went down, but anybody who's calling in via phone, we think we still have you. So thank you for those of you that are still with us. We will be happy to follow up with these slides for future reference, and we will also follow up with the planned giving piece for anybody who would like more information there. And Tom, I think you said it best. So I will let your comments wrap us up, and very thankful for everyone's time this afternoon.
Thank you, everybody.
Good. Thanks, everyone.